Welcome back to the Pack and Clint Show here on Total Coverage Sports. I'm Pack, that's Clint. Super happy for you guys to be here with us. We're talking a little bit of Red River. We're talking Oklahoma and Texas. We're breaking down their rosters, talking a little bit about their first 22 guys. Then we'll talk about their schedule. We'll break down each one of their big games. We'll break down what we think their floor and their ceiling are, whether we think they're national title contenders or if we think they're a cut below that. Then after we do those two teams, we'll just talk a little bit about Tennessee, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, and I'll do a little bit on A&M. And then we'll kind of give you guys our full SEC outlook. We'll give you guys, based off of the predictions we've made, what we think the SEC championship is going to end up being and who we think will end up winning it. So super happy for you guys to be here with us. Before we get into anything, though, please like, subscribe, comment, and retweet. We really appreciate every time you guys do that. Helps us a lot. Helps put it in. Helps put out our content in front of more people, which is always super helpful for us. So thankful for you guys being here. And we'll, Clint, if you're ready to go, we can jump into Oklahoma.
Yeah, let's go ahead. All right, so for Oklahoma, Ben Arbuckle is going to be the OC. What it says air raid, it's pretty much spot on in terms of what they run. In terms of how they run it, it's really just a typical air raid offense. They're gonna have a little bit more QB run game than a normal one maybe would, but other than that, it's pretty self-explanatory in the name. In terms of the personnel that they got, return John Mateer obviously was started for them last year. Dealt with thumb injuries towards the second half of the season, but still was able to lead his team to a playoff. And then for running back, you bring back two guys that you had last year who I believe were their two leading rushers in Xavier Robinson and Torrey Blaylock. So you get some good returning production there. You bring in Hayden Hansen from trying to remember what school. Was it Florida?
Yes, it was
Florida. Okay, yeah. So you bring him in, then you bring Rocky Beers and just bringing some good pieces for the tight ends. They're not going to have an insane tight end room at all, but it'll be serviceable. And then in terms of receivers, you bring back Isaiah Sategna, who had a great year last year for Oklahoma. And then you bring in two transfers and Trell Harris from Virginia, who eclipsed nearly 900 yards last year. And then you bring in Parker Livingston from Texas, who was their wide receiver 3/4 last year and had some good moments, but was a little bit inconsistent throughout the year. So, and then on the offensive line, you bring back one returning starter with Michael Fasusi, and then left guard or right guard. You have some new starters coming in with last year, Eddie Pierre-Louis being behind Heath Ozeda, with Jack Makula being behind Troy Everett, and then at right guard with Ryan Foge being behind Febechi Nweu. I don't know how to pronounce that. But either way, they bring out one returning starter, and then you bring in Marion Harris to fill in that right tackle spot. Overall, I think this offense will be better than last year. Reason being is because you have Sategna, and then you also bring in Harris, who I think was a great receiver last year. You're going to have a, God willing, for Oklahoma, healthy John Mateer this year. And if you have a full year of him healthy, it's going to be a lot more of explosive offense than it was last year towards the back half, where he was dealing with a lingering injury the entire year. So I think overall there will be an improvement with the offense. But I'm not super I don't think it's going to be one of the best in the country, but it'll be improved.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there. So one of the things I feel like I noticed last year with them was, it really felt like there was a lot of boom or bust with them in the pass game, right? I think they had 5 or 6 major explosives with Isaiah Satania in the past game where it was either an RPO glance, double slant on some quick game action, or it was, we're going to run an RPO slant. It felt like, or a drag, right? It felt like that was a lot of where they got explosives from. They had a touchdown against Ole Miss on a drag concept, and then they had a touchdown against LSU on what I think was an RPO glance, might have been an RPO slant. I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but you saw that a lot from them where it felt like they didn't consistently generate a whole lot of great offense. And you assume that, if John Mateer can be a little bit healthier, if they can protect him a little bit more, you hope that you can see a little bit more of just a consistent offense. And then I think the other thing that's noteworthy in terms of a schematic change that I don't know if many people are aware of is this year they are going to lean a little bit more into outside zone. So last year it was a lot of inside zone and QB power, QB counter, QB bash, stuff like that. That was really their main bread and butter last year. This year you're going to see a little bit more of outside zone, so a little bit more perimeter based run game. And to me, I think that's a great fit for some of the guys that they have there. Really, I'm thinking about a guy like Michael Fasusi, who is one of the most athletic offensive tackles in the entire country. Eddie Pierre Lewis is really good in space as well. So I think that is a good move for them. And then getting Parker Livingston in there, he's a deep ball threat, not really a great route runner. Hands can be shaky at times, but he is going to be able to stretch the field vertically, offer them something to create a second opportunity for explosives rather than relying on the yards after catch that Isaiah Satania brung a lot last year. And then Trell Harris is a transfer, which you talked about. So to me, that's kind of how I view this Oklahoma offense is I think it's going to be better. I think just by the fact that I think their run game is going to benefit their offensive line a little bit more. And as long as they stay healthy, you really assume that they can't be much worse than they were last year. It's a third year for John Mateer in the system. So you assume that that's yet another opportunity for growth. They're bringing back their two best players in the backfield with Torrey Blaylock and Xavier Robinson. So a lot of things to be very positive about for them.
Yeah, I got nothing else to add to that, so you can move on to the defense.
Okay, so when we're talking about the defense, multiple is probably the only real word you could use. So there isn't really a base defense for Oklahoma. They do just about literally everything. They play cover one at times. They'll play cover two with Tampa. They'll play cover three a lot. They'll play quarters and they'll do it out of a mid structure. They'll play two man. They'll play two steel. They'll play two roll. They'll play eyes coverage. They'll play red zone stuff like turkey. They'll run simulated pressures. They do just about everything really. They'll play dime on third down. They'll play nickel on third down. They'll play blitz coverage. They'll use a lot of 8-up and 7-up presentations to fool you. It's it's one of the hardest teams to prepare for in the entire season. It is really, really hard to prepare for Oklahoma defensively. And if you just want to see a little bit of what they do, just check out my page at CoachPack_ and look up Oklahoma. There's about 3 weeks worth of content. I covered the entire season for them. They do so much. It's really, really hard to really describe them just because of all of the different things they do, how complex they are, and really how well they execute with how complex they are. They have the best 3 high package in the entire country, and it's not even something that they base in. So that kind of goes to show you what this Oklahoma defense is about. It's it's to me, it's the best defense schematically in the entire country. You're not going to watch a team that changes themselves more week to week and still executes at the highest level. It is really, really impressive. And then you add in the fact that they'll play zone match coverage, they'll play man match coverage. It's pretty endless in terms of what they're going to be able to do on the defensive end. And it's a really fun study, honestly. So then talking a little bit about just the roster, they're going to be really, really good up front. David Stone is a potential first round pick. Now, the one thing I will say about David Stone that I think you have to be a little bit wary of is his first 2 years. It's been a lot more flash than it has consistent production. So he'll have some really good moments, but he's not always consistently great from a down to down perspective. Those of you who are familiar with Dane Brugler, he actually agrees with me on that. He had mentioned it in his scouting report. So you do need him to be consistent more often. And then Jaden Jackson is one of the most underrated players in all of America. He's really damn good, really, really strong, does a great job as a 2-eye, even a 3 technique of holding the point and never getting displaced. So really valuable in terms of that sense. And then Dave, Odobowe, sorry. I'm looking at Heineke, sorry. Heineke and Kip Lewis at linebacker is a top 3 linebacker room in the SEC. Owen Heineke is one of the best linebackers at fitting the run, really patient. His eyes are always in a good spot. Kip Lewis is a really, really good blitzer as well. And then when we're talking about defensive ends, Taylor Wine, really good player. Kenny Ozawalu, he comes from, I believe it's UTEP or it's one of the school, it's one of the Texas schools. I can't remember off the top of my head. It might have been
UTSA.
UTSA. He's a good player. I think he's going to be a good depth piece for them. Taylor Wines is an absolute stud. Played behind and played with R. Mason Thomas last year, and really when R. Mason Thomas came out, not a whole lot of difference because of how good Taylor Wine played. Ede Baware, the right defensive end, good run defender, really good run defender. Missing a little bit in terms of when you start rushing the passer, you don't notice him as much. That is something that you'd want to see a little bit more of him. And then on the back end, their cheetah, that's for anyone who's a little bit confused. That's the same thing as a star or a nickel. And typically for Oklahoma, it's going to be a bigger body. This year, it's a little bit more of a traditional nickel, which with Reggie Powers. Cortland Guillory is heading into his sophomore year. Had a really good freshman year. Had some stuff that he's going to have to clean up from a technical standpoint in terms of his footwork and in terms of making sure that when he's playing press, he's shooting the right hand. He's not locking his hip out, stuff like that, where he's got to get a little bit better from a technical perspective. And then for Peyton Bowen, a good player at strong safety. Eli Bowen, his brother, also a good player, a little bit undersized, but really strong technically and really, really comfortable in off coverage. Does a great job of, when he is working through a pedal, keeping his chest over his toes, being able to drive off that back foot because he's keeping his front shoulder down, doing a good job of keeping his weight on his front sides. That way, if he ever needs to transition, he can. I think he does a really good job in terms of understanding route concepts as well. You'll see him break early on stuff when it may not immediately be clear what an offense is running. So that shows you how well he does scout teamwork. And then Michael Boganowski, he's going to be a new player for them. I transferred Dakota Fields from Oregon. I do think he'll play. Lacks some level of top end speed, but is really, really, really good outside of that. So those are kind of the overviews of this defense. I could talk for 4 hours about what they do schematically. That's how complex they are. But Clint, that's it for me. If you're ready to jump into the schedule, we can do that.
Let's do it.
Okay, so week 1, they play UTEP. We're not going to discuss these games too much just because it's really unlikely they lose these games. And if they're going to lose one of these major upset games, we'll be proven wrong. We're not going to be proven right. So we both have them winning. Then we have them going to Michigan. Clint, you can start off with why you have them losing, and then I'll get into why I have them winning.
Yeah, so this game was truly a 50-50 toss-up for me. I was really going back and forth on if I have them winning or losing this game. I think the difference between me is, one, I really like Kyle Whittingham as a coach. I do. I think all the work you did at Utah over the years, like, you never had a season where they were real. I mean, okay, you did have seasons where they were really bad. Actually, never mind. Either way, though, I think they're good. I think Bryce Underwood will improve a lot over this offseason. I'm just guessing. And I think that it being at Michigan was probably the deciding factor for me. I think after last year's game, they have a bit of a red ass, and I think that they're going to come out and win.
Yeah, I can. So I can understand that. For me, I think it's the fact that just based on the reports in the spring and the summer about Bryce Underwood, it really hasn't been as encouraging as maybe you'd hope. You would have liked to see a pretty significant step up heading into his sophomore year, and I don't know that you've really heard that, and so that does bring me concern, especially when if you're going to be a struggling quarterback or you're a quarterback who has a lot of flaws, and you're facing a Brent Venables defense that typically doesn't go super well, and the fact that this is going to be a new system for the Michigan players, both offensively and defensively, with Jay Hill and the I'm forgetting the offensive coordinator's name, but that to me is a real stress point and why I'm a little bit less confident in this Michigan team, and that's why I have Oklahoma winning because there's going to be more continuity for Oklahoma on both sides of the ball. I think they're more talented, and I do think with the questions I have at quarterback with Michigan, I do think you do need a pretty strong performance from your quarterback to beat Oklahoma because it's pretty rare you're going to be able to consistently run the ball on their defensive line and with how their linebackers fit the run.
Yeah, I just want to stress this that this is probably the least confident pick I've had out of this entire series that we've done.
Yeah. So then New Mexico, like we said, not going through those too much. And then at Georgia, we both have this being a loss. This might be one of the 10 games I'm most intrigued and most interested by. You imagine that this will be a night kickoff, most likely the ABC primetime game. I imagine College Game Day will be here. And I have this as a loss simply because I think Georgia's going to be a lot better defensively. I think that for the first time since 2023 or 2022, on third down, they're actually going to be able to play some dime. I don't think they're going to be as reliant on staying in nickel because when you're in nickel on third down and third down and long in particular, you are somewhat limited in terms of what you can run, right? You can't be as coverage facing. You can't run as many different coverages because you have two linebackers that may not be their specialty. Now with George, it's a little different because Justin Williams and Chris Cole can cover like safeties, especially Chris Cole. But to me, that's where that dime package for them becomes really valuable, where you're able to put out those two really good corners in DeMello Jones and Ellis Robinson. And then you've got KJ Bolden, you got Khalil Barnes, and then you can put out Rayshawn Dinkins or Jamari Riddle or um, or Boogie Green, right? That's a lot of really good utility weapons, especially when you then pair that with Chris Cole. I think when they play dime on third down, Georgia's going to be really, really good defensively. And I think that's going to allow them to be better at rushing the passer because when you've got six DBs that can really cover, you can be a little bit more aggressive in terms of bringing pressure. And so I think they're going to be better there. I think they're going to, and really that to me is the big difference for Georgia. I think that's why they're going to be elite defensively. And because I think they're going to be elite defensively, I think they're going to be able to score, 20, 23 points just about against just about everyone because of the way they play offensively. And so for me, this really comes down to the fact that Georgia's at home because this is the ultimate the styles clash because you don't really run the ball against Oklahoma. And Georgia's one of those teams who, with Gunnar Stockton, kind of does need to run the ball to win.
Yeah, I was actually gonna make that point. If there are maybe a few like three SEC teams that I could see being able to successfully run the ball against Oklahoma, one of them's gonna be Georgia. Not only with their quarterback, but I think Nate Frazier and Chauncey Bones is a top three running back duo in the SEC right now. I think that they have a really good offense this year, even though they lost a lot. And we've covered this in the last episode. I think I like Mike Bobo. I think he's what he's able to do with what he has. He does a really damn good job at it. And I think it being at home, if it was at Oklahoma, I would have Oklahoma winning, but it being at Georgia, I'm going with Georgia.
Yeah, I think that's really the big one is Sanford Stadium. The only team that beats them there is Alabama, so
Yeah.
then they have their bye week, and then their next game is the Red River Shootout, the Red River rivalry, whatever you call it. Really, really intriguing game for me because this will be for me This will be Oklahoma coming off of a loss. And I think Texas, I don't remember who they play before this, but I believe it is a cupcake. So you imagine that Texas is going to be the fresher team. They're both going to be pretty well battle tested at this point. Texas is going to have Ohio State, and Oklahoma would have already had Michigan and then Georgia. But I have Texas winning just because I've seen Georgia really struggle. I've seen, sorry, Oklahoma really struggle with wide zone and with Texas in particular. It feels like really when we're talking about it, Sarkeesian is one of the few that can really match Venables from a play calling standpoint in terms of being able to adjust to what Venables is doing and finding solutions. And we've seen that really throughout the last 3 games that they've played, where it has started somewhat slow for Georgia, for Texas, and then they figured it out a little bit later. And then you add on to the fact that I think Texas is going to be pretty awesome defensively. I think they're going to present a lot of problems and a lot of different looks to John Mateer. I do think Texas wins because they're more talented, because I think they have the coaching advantage, and because I think they're going to be able to really put some stress on John Mateer.
Yeah, I actually found this interesting stat. So when Sark and Venables have faced ever since got to Oklahoma in the 4 years, Texas averages 34 points a game against Oklahoma, whereas Oklahoma they have a new offensive coordinator last year they got, but the average score has been in the last 4 games 34-10. So I mean, it seems like when Sark and Venables meet, Sark has had his number the entire time. And the point you made, even though they started off slow last game and the year before, um,
Even the year
Texas,
before that,
yeah.
remember they had the interception, I think a fumble right after that
Oh
too.
yeah, yeah. Quinn threw an interception second play, and then the next drive, Jatavion Sanders gets popped and they get an interception.
Yeah,
So yeah, you just had a slow offensive starts in every game besides 2022. Um, and even though I think Oklahoma will be better than last year, I think that Texas will continue their winning streak. I think that they'll win this game. I just until I see Venables really truly stop Sark like or Glenn Schumann's been able to do the past 2 years, I'm gonna go with Texas.
yeah. Just adding on to your point, so Texas scored in the first in the first quarter of the last 3 games a combined total of 7 points.
And that was a blocked punt.
Yeah. So the offense, and then when you look at the second quarter and beyond, it's 23 points last year. Now, 7 of those were the
Punt return.
Ryan Niblett punt return. But if you look at that, they could have scored more than that, right? They had the Arch Manning had a run down to like the 30-yard line that would have yielded them some points.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can effectively count that as 23 points. They scored 34 points in in the last 3 quarters of the 2024 game. They scored 23 in the last 3 quarters of the 2023 game, and then they scored 42 in the last 3 quarters of the 2022 game. So when you're looking at what really happens in this matchup, it's Tech just starts really slow. Venables kind of has Sark's number early, and then Sark kind of figures some things out. So I think that's kind of one of the things you have to really remember with this matchup. And so for Oklahoma, a big key is, can they start fast? If they can go up 10-0, 7-0, 14-0, they put themselves in a really good spot. But if they really struggle early and it's a 0-0 game, they're up 0-3, you don't love their chances just based off of what history seems to tell us.
Yeah.
So then Kentucky, we both have this being a win. It's at home, and they're the more talented team. It's going to be Will Stein's first look at Venables, and that's a hard thing to do, to face Venables for the first time on the road when they're really talented. Tough one to do.
Yeah. Also, as well, Will Stein, I think eventually, if he's able to get the talent there in Kentucky, I think that he will be a really damn good play caller. I think he has the ability to beat guys like Schumann and Venables. But I think just the first year with the talent discrepancy that's going to be there, I think Oklahoma's going to win.
Yeah, I'm with you there. So then at Mississippi State, again, I think for me the problem is Kamario Taylor is still pretty limited in terms of what I believe he is as a passer. And if you look at what happened to Bryce Underwood last year, who was kind of in a similar situation where really talented but not super refined yet, not a real processor just yet, really struggled. Didn't really have great moments, couldn't really find any consistent ball placement, and you have to be able to be accurate against Oklahoma because the windows are going to be tight. They do such a good job in zone coverage of not only playing everything top down, but playing with really good vision. So understanding how to break, and because their corners all play with tremendous body leverage in terms of where their weight is, in terms of the ability for them to break in an instant in zone coverage. Windows that look big tend to be really small, so you have to be really accurate. And I don't know that Kamario Taylor is that. And then really, Mississippi State, I don't think is going to be able to run the ball against Oklahoma. And when you can't run the ball and you have a quarterback who's not the most refined passer, that's usually a good sign that you're going to struggle against Oklahoma. And on the other side, I think Mississippi State's not really at that level yet in terms of where they're a great defense. And so for me, it's a fairly comfortable win for Oklahoma.
Yeah. This game's just interesting to me in the fact that you're going to have Venables playing one of his probably his first protege that's become a head coach, Jeff Lebby. So that's a little interesting thing to me. But historically, when you look at how Venables done against different offenses, against the veer and shoot, which Mississippi State runs, he's done pretty well throughout his career. Kamario Taylor, it's going to be his first year starting. I don't think I think he's a good player. I don't think he's going to be that he's that good of a player to where he's going to be able to dissect their defense. I think that Mississippi State will lose this game.
Yeah. So then South Carolina at home. I think by this point, South Carolina's season's like it's starting to really hit downhill. They have a really easy start to the schedule, so that's going to help them out quite a bit. But by this point, I do think this is where the wheels start to fall off for South Carolina, and they start working towards that 5-7, 6-6 season. So I have them losing this game, and I think Oklahoma's a lot more talented. I think they're going to be able to really beat up that South Carolina offensive line, and if you can do that, you're going to create a lot of stress for Lenora Sellers. And as we saw last year, when you put a lot of pressure on him, when you hit him a lot, doesn't go super great.
Yeah, unless I've been living on a rock, I haven't heard anything about South Carolina's offensive line becoming much improved at all. This is going to be a bad game for them. It's whatever it looked like. If you remember the 2024 South Carolina Oklahoma game, it's going to be the inverse of that, to where Oklahoma is just going to be firing on all cylinders and their offense is going to get clobbered.
Yeah, and the one thing I will say to your point about the offensive line, I do think they, in theory, would have been better. But the thing that you have to remember that they is that Jacarius Peak got hurt, and then the other off. And Jacarius Peak's a really good player. He's a guy that could have ended up being his first round pick, but he's going to be gone for at least half the year and probably a little bit later. And when you do that, there's going to be that acclimation process, and I think that's going to play a pretty significant role for them. And then they had one more transfer whose name I can't remember right now. It might have been Dane Arnett, but they had two guys that were really good players as transfers that ended up getting hurt. So that to me was really a death wish, because if they had those two guys, I think you would have felt a lot more confident about them. But without those two, it kind of throws everything into a little bit of a stressful situation. Josiah Thompson, that's who it
Okay,
was.
I got you.
Yeah. Um, so in the next week at Florida, I have this being a really close game at the Swamp with Buster Faulkner as your offensive coordinator. That is going to be a really fun matchup. Venables and Faulkner, two guys that are both top five play callers in terms of what they do. Faulkner being an offensive coordinator, and then Venables being a defensive play caller. That will be a lot of fun. I think that especially when you look at how talented Florida is, there's a real chance for this to end up being a really close game. And I do have it being a really close game, but I think the experience of Venables being in the SEC, of Mateer actually having a lot of reps under his belt, I think for me that's what I'm really leaning on here to have Oklahoma winning this game.
Yeah, this is gonna be a cool matchup in terms of the type of offense Buster runs and the type of defense Venables runs. I think it'll be close to it being at the Swamp, but I think Oklahoma, they're just more talented. And I think that that talent's gonna show.
Yep. So then we have them playing Ole Miss at home. This one's just like your Michigan pick. This is a 50-50 for me. This is a really, really interesting matchup because last year it felt like really the only team to find consistent success against Oklahoma was Ole Miss. But now Ole Miss has a new offensive coordinator, a new head coach. That feels like that's a pretty significant change, a pretty significant movement that is not the same. And so that to me creates some hesitation. And then when you look at the other side of the ball, I do think Oklahoma is going to struggle. I think Pete Golding, when you give him the right pieces, is one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. And when you look at what they were in 2024 from a schematic standpoint, they were one of my favorite studies I think I've seen ever. That's how good they were. And so, you know, I think they're going to be a little bit more like that than they will be in terms of what they were last year. So I do think this is going to be a low scoring game, a really competitive game, but I am picking Oklahoma just because it is at home.
Yeah, that's literally the reason why I picked Oklahoma is because it's at home. That's
Yeah.
it.
So then Texas A&M at home. One, I think against wide zone, one of the issues that happens when you play Texas A&M style of defense is you really create no level of overlap, right? So once you plug a gap, that linebacker is completely out of the play. And when you do that against wide zone, it gives you a lot of boom, but it also gives you a lot of bust because if that if that backer doesn't cut the play off or hit the back, you have no ability to make a play at the second level, and that is a real problem for them. And it's something I don't think is going to change for next year. And then, quite frankly, I think Venables against Marcel Reed is maybe the biggest mismatch of any two SEC teams from a coordinator to a quarterback standpoint. That's going to be to me a bloodbath. I think Venables will put Marcel Reed in some pretty horrible spots for him. And so I have Oklahoma winning.
I think the main reason I have Oklahoma winning this game is because at least for A&M, you have a really tough stretch in those last 2 weeks. You have to go to Oklahoma on the road, and then on a short week, you have Texas coming into College Station, to where those two games combined is up there with one of the toughest in the conference. But I think that I just have Oklahoma winning.
So then they end the year at Missouri. Missouri by this time should have Ahmad Hardy back, but if there's one thing we know about that coaching staff and really about Eli Drinkowitz, it's they beat the teams that they're supposed to, and then they lose against almost everyone else, save for Ohio State. So for me, that is kind of the start and end. There is Oklahoma's a really good team, and Missouri doesn't typically beat really good teams.
I've just gone to the point to where I see Missouri as the Iowa of the SEC, to where they never do anything spectacular, but they never do anything horrible. So um, I think I just think they're going to be okay this game, and they're going to lose. So I think Oklahoma's going to win.
So we both have them at 10, and I have them at 10-2. You have them at 9-3. For me, I don't view them as a. To me, they're not a national title contender, but I do think they're a quarterfinal to semifinal contender. I think for me, the problem is John Mateer. His struggles last year weren't about his thumb, really; they were about his brain, and I don't know if that's been fixed enough to really warrant full confidence.
Um, it's tough because, like, I think as a team they have the ability to make it to a semifinal. In all honesty, it's just the problem is they're at 9-3 in my predictions, and I don't know if a 9-3 team can make the playoff.
Not
Yeah,
with that schedule. I don't
yeah,
think.
and with the losses they have, it's not like you're playing like three top five teams. So they'll be having fun at the Cheez-Its Bowl.
Yep. So then we can hop over to the other side of the Red River and talk a little bit about Texas if you're ready.
Yeah. Okay, so for Texas, um, obviously Coach Stark, he's gonna be the play caller. He runs a pro spread. We're gonna see a lot of motion. You'll see a lot of across, a lot of orbit, just all different types of motions that you could think of. A lot of RPO game too. Um, and then you'll see a lot of what you saw at the end of last year. I feel like with the spread offense, more spread than compact. You'll see a good amount of bunches too. We'll have to see how the O line works this year and how they're able to run that stuff. But that's just a little very brief overview of the offense. And then actually the last point is that they will hunt explosives anytime they can. But uh, quarterback Arch Manning, he's coming back. Had a pretty bad start to last year, but ended off really good in the second half of the season with KJ Lacey backing him up. And then they brought in MJ Morris from, I believe, Coastal Carolina to have an experienced backup like they did last year with Matthew Caldwell taking him from Troy. In the running back position, you have arguably the best 1-2 duo in the country with Hollywood Smothers and then Raleek Brown, both 1,000-yard backs at their respective schools. Hollywood Smothers at North Carolina State, who originally was committed to Alabama, but Texas was able to flip him in the portal, and then Raleek Brown from Arizona State. And then you have the freshman Derek Cooper coming in, who, from what I've heard from camp, is doing really good, and you should see him get some touches this year. Moving to the wide receiver room, you have Emmett Mosley and Ryan Wingo returning from last year, and then you bring in Cam Coleman, who was arguably the best receiver in the portal last year and is a fringe top 10 pick for next year's draft. So you have a really, really damn good starting three at wide receiver. You also have Jermaine Bishop, who has had really good reports coming from camp. You bring back McCutcheon and Khalil Lockett, and then Sterling Burkhalter. He is the transfer from Wake Forest. The clips around 400 something yards last year. He's not going to be a starter, but he'll definitely get some time in the rotation. And then moving to the O-line, you bring back Connor Robertson and Brandon Baker and Trevor Gooseby. You have 3 returning starters. And then you bring in Melvin Siani at right tackle from Wake Forest, who I believe had all conference honors last year. And then you at the left guard position, where Texas last year in terms of pass protection, at the left guard position ranked last in the FBS. I believe allowing pressure to arch 25% of the time, which is horrible. So you're hoping you get an upgrade, which I think you will at left guard with Lawrence Seymour. He's going to be not like your prototypical lineman you see in Texas, where it's been a lot of the big human stuff. He's a lot smaller than all the other ones. I believe only like 6'2". So that's the only issue there. And then Cole Hudson, I believe, is coming back. So it should be Lawrence Seymour starting, but we'll see how that competition ends up going. And then you have the tight ends with Michael Masunas coming in from Michigan State. And then you have Nick Townsend returning, who this list is wrong. It's Nick and Michael as the 1-2, not Shannon and Winston. But other than that, that's your overview of the offense. I think it's going to be a really damn good offense this year. And yeah, that's really all I have to say about it.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add. I'll just say some of the things about the running back room, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the younger guys that I think could be really high impact guys. So I think, when we're looking at a three-headed monster in terms of best ones in the SEC, you would agree that Texas is number one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about Hollywood Brothers, who was, I believe, an All ACC back with NC State. Although don't quote me there. Did go for a lot in the portal. Was initially committed to Alabama. Texas got in there late. Yeah, Hollywood Smothers was first team All ACC last year.
Oh wow.
Yeah, Raleek Brown was a really good player for
ASU.
Yeah, for Arizona State. And he comes over, and that's going to be a really good 1-2 punch. And then Derek Cooper was pretty awesome in the spring and followed that up with a really good summer. He's going to play early, and he's going to play really well. There was a reason why ESPN had him as a 5-star. And Clint, I know you and I, when we talk to fellow Texas people that are really invested in scouting and in high school recruiting, a lot of them were really, really big fans of Derek Cooper. So I think it's the best running back room in the SEC, and that's a pretty far cry from when you're looking at last year, where CJ Baxter couldn't really stay healthy, and Trey Wisner had some really good moments, but wasn't consistently great. And then when you look at the upgrades that they made up front, Melvin Siani is a top 10 tackle prospect in terms of when you're looking at offensive linemen for the next draft. Trevor Guzman is the best offensive tackle prospect for next year's draft. Lawrence Seymour for the Football Writers Association of America. He was a first team All American. Brandon Baker's kicking inside, and I think he projects a lot better at guard than he does at tackle. And then you return Connor Robertson, who kind of helped stabilize the ship. I think a lot of the weaknesses that Texas had last year, they addressed in a pretty meaningful way. And then you look at Cam Coleman replacing Parker Livingstone. It's a pretty sizable upgrade right there. And then in terms of just talking a little bit about some of the freshmen, I think Jermaine Bishop's going to play a lot. I think he's going to be one of the more electric players that you see across the country just because of when the ball goes in his hands, it's just a little bit different in terms of what's going to happen. So I think that's a guy that you really need to pay attention to. And him and Derek Cooper are two freshmen that I think are going to be really, really high impact guys.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said there.
So then talking about the defense, this is Will Muschamp's first year. So I think from a structural standpoint, I don't know that a lot of what he did at Georgia is going to be carrying over a ton to what he does at Texas, right? Georgia and really Glenn Schumann is a super heavy mid front guy. And when you look at what they were last year, it was almost 50-50 from a mid front to a four down standpoint. I would imagine Will Muschamp's going to be a little bit more like Dan Lanning, a little bit more like Nick Saban, a little bit more like Kirby Smart, where they're a little bit more four down based, and they're going to play a lot more rip Liz match. And when I say rip Liz match, you're thinking cover three, and if you get a vertical seam route, it turns into man coverage for those two curl flat players. So for four verticals, it's man coverage. For any cover one beater, it turns into a typical cover three zone concept. So that'll be one of the base concepts you see from Will Muschamp. You'll also see a lot of cover seven, and that's man match quarters. So you're playing one coverage to one side, and then you're playing an entirely separate coverage to the other side. It gets really hard for a quarterback to figure out what's going on. Cover seven for a lot of people is the most complex coverage menu in all of football. So you can expect to see that a lot. And I think the big thing that Texas fans should really anticipate is they're going to be pretty multiple defensively. The 4-2-5 is a good way of thinking about it. But beyond that, the thing that I think you need to really recognize is they're going to play a lot tighter coverage. Now, that doesn't mean that they're always going to play press man. They're always going to play cover one, but they are going to play some form of man most of the time, or they're going to play concepts that eventually turn into man, where they're going to play rip lays. That's zone that turns into man. They're going to play man match quarters. That's man that can turn into zone, but will stay man against most concepts. So I think that's the really big thing to recognize is, they're going to start by playing and trying to be tight in coverage, force you to make a lot of really tight window throws, force you into tough spots. And if they can do that, they give their defensive line, which is really, really good, a lot of opportunities to really hunt the passer. And so when we're talking about their defensive line, you start with Colin Simmons, right? Should be a top 10 pick if he produces the way we think he will. And then you're looking at a guy like Lance Jackson, who in the 2028 draft could end up being a first round draft pick. Hero Canoe will be a top 4 round pick, I would guess. And then opposite him, it will not be Ian Jaffard, who quite frankly I'm not super high on. I think that'll end up being Alex January, who should be really good. That would kind of be my thought on the defensive line. And then in terms of depth, there's a lot of really valuable depth there. Murad Watson's a good player. Justice Terry is a guy that if he does what I think he will do, he'll be a starter by the end of the year, and he'll be in the talks next year for a first round draft pick. He is immensely talented, really, really strong, but super twitchy. That's something that I would really watch out for. I think he's a guy that I think is going to break out. And then when you move up to the second level with the linebackers, to me, this is a real weakness for Texas. I'm not super high on this linebacker room. It'll end up being most likely Rasheem Biles and Ty Anthony Smith or Justin Cryer. I don't think Justin Cryer is any good in coverage. I think he's okay in the run game. He's pretty physical, but I don't know that I trust him as A to C stack track fallback run fitter, and that's what he's going to be asked to do. I don't think he's particularly great at it. And then Rasheem Biles is a great blitzer, but he's really light and he can't handle contact very well. When you watched him last year at Pitt, when guys got two hands on him, he was getting vertically displaced 5 or 6 yards deep, and you can't have that linebacker. So to me, that's going to be a real weakness for Texas and something that they're going to have to find solutions for. They're going to have to figure out ways to cope with that, and it's something that will really determine how great they are defensively. Knowing who they have at DC, I do think they're going to find some ways to put them in good spots. And really, you're thinking about how are they going to do that? It starts with the first being they're going to blitz a lot. They're going to use a lot of creepers or a lot of simulated pressures. You're going to see them run Brady, Winston, Favre, things to get those linebackers blitzing because they're really, really good at that. That's kind of an area of strength for them. So I think you'll see that. And then when you're talking about guys that I think if they step up, they'll be in a lot better spot. If Tyler Atkinson can build off of a strong summer where in the spring wasn't great, really struggled with the playbook, but in the summer really started to figure some things out, started to see things a little bit clearer. If he can really take a step up and he can get close to 225 pounds, him and Rasheem Biles gives you a lot more confidence. Neither one of them is very big, but Tyler Atkinson is the best pure linebacker on this team. And so if he can take that step and if he can play, that'll be really, really impactful for Texas. On the back end, Bo Mascow is their best corner. Really good players, going to be able to move inside to nickel as well. Really good in press, really good in off. Not a whole lot to say negatively about him. Jelani McDonald is a guy that's going to fight for a first round draft pick, can do so much, really can play as a dime linebacker when Texas plays third down dime rabbits in their dime rabbits package. And their dime rabbits package is their four best pass rushers and then six DBs and one linebacker. I would imagine you see that a lot on third down, knowing how deep their cornerback room is and how deep their safety room is in terms of bodies. Jelani McDonald's a great player. And then at free safety, Xavier Filsaime is not supposed to be there. Xavier Filsaime is actually practicing at star right now, or what's known as nickel here. So just be wary of that. Cade Phillips is currently the starter. Kobe Black is practicing at free safety, I believe. And so I think they're going to be good on the back end. Really, to me, the make or break thing is on third down is Will Muschamp going to be willing to play dime? Because if you put out a dime package of Kobe Black, Cade Phillips, Grayson Littleton, Jelani McDonald, Bo Mascow, and whoever the sixth guy is, that's four cornerbacks really. So you're going to be able to be really, really tight in coverage, do so much on the back end, and let your four best pass rushers eat. And with who the pass rushers on Texas are, that feels like a really big recipe for success. And just to talk about one more guy before I wrap it up, Richard Wesley will play a lot, and he's going to be a first round draft pick in 3 years. He is really, really damn good.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add. If you want to go to the schedule now,
Yeah, we can do that. So,
all right.
week one, they play Texas State. Both have them winning, as we talked about. Not doing too much of breaking these games down just because we don't really feel like boring you guys with meaningless analysis. So then the next week, college game day will be here. It's the night kickoff. It's versus Ohio State. We both have them winning. One, Julian Saint hasn't really faced a defense like this. It's way different than everything he's ever seen before, and that to me is one of the big things where when Julian Saint was thrown looks that he wasn't comfortable with against Indiana and against Miami, he was terrible. He was truly awful in those two games. I think Texas is going to have the opportunity to not only win up front in the pass rush department, but really show him a bunch of different looks on the back end and confuse him. And a tree like this, they're going to have a lot of answers for Jeremiah Smith. They're going to be able to run seven special, flex custom. They're going to be able to run a lot of different things to put him in tough spots to cloud him, to double him, to put a cone bracket on him. They're going to be able to force it. They're going to be able to make it really hard to throw the football to him. And it's going to be on then Brandon Innes and Chris Henry Jr. to step up. And you don't know if that's going to happen. And then I don't think the Ohio State run game is going to be awesome. I do think it'll be good because Arthur Smith is a really good run game designer, but I don't know that they're going to be super explosive because Bo Jackson really isn't a super explosive runner, and their offensive line, while good, I don't think is great. And so I do think Texas is going to be able to cause problems defensively. And then on the other side, Ohio State's replacing something like 8 starters. I do think that'll have a toll. Now they'll be really talented, but I don't know that they'll be what they were last year. And I do think with a better offensive line and Arch Manning not playing with the hiccups like he did last year, I think you'll see him play really well. And I think Texas will win this game.
Yeah. I'm just gonna piggyback right after where you finished with the O line and Arch's play last year. I mean, even with how bad Arch played last year, if you look at the game, I mean, Texas was able to move the ball better than Ohio State was. Ohio State only got the ball twice past the 50-yard line, whereas Texas, I can count from my memory, was in the red zone at least 4 different times, but was only able to capitalize once. And that was with an offense that was super anemic last year, in my opinion. Um, had no passing game whatsoever, which was due to Arch and his accuracy. Um, but you have a much improved Texas team this year, a lot more improved than I think Ohio State is, just to be completely frank. And then when it comes to their offense and their wide receiver production, I'm not a fan of Cortez Hankton at all. I think what he did at LSU was a horrible job. Um, and I mean, there's nothing in my mind that's going to make me change my mind in terms of what I think he can do at Ohio State. Um, I think all those things, and then obviously being at home in front of a night crowd, I think that Texas will end up winning. And then moving on to the third game, we have UTSA. We have them both winning. We're not going to even cover that one. Um, fourth game, we have Texas going to Knoxville for their first SEC game of the season on the road, 11 a.m. slot. I think that this could be a close game at the start. I think that Tennessee could have some things go their way to start, but I think Texas will, especially in the second half, they'll right away with the game. I have it about a 34-21 type game.
Yeah, for me, I think this comes down to two things. One, a brand new quarterback for Tennessee at this point. It'll be Faison Brandon most likely. And the second thing is, when you look at the Saban tree, they've had a lot of success against this defense, right? When you look at what Georgia's done minus last year, and last year, a lot of Tennessee's success came off of outside of the first drive. They hit two major explosives in the pass game that were one of them was Ellis Robinson panics, and the other was Daniel Jones just gets mossed, right? And so when two of your touchdowns come from that, it's hard to really evaluate that in the full context and think, yeah, they're definitely gonna be able to have consistent success against this tree. When you look at conversely, Georgia with Will Muschamp in 2022 faced the number one offense in the country in Tennessee and pretty much boxed them. And then in 2023 with Will Muschamp, gave up something like 10 points. So this is a tree that, and really with Will Muschamp, the 2 years that he faced Tennessee, he had wild success against them. He gave up, I think it might have been an aggregate of 11.5 points per game in those 2 games. And so to me, it's the fact that Will Muschamp has a lot of success against this tree, the fact that it is a new defense, and the fact that it is a new coordinate, a new quarterback for Tennessee. That makes me believe that Texas is going to win this game. And I do agree with you, close early, but Texas slowly pulls away towards the end.
Yeah. Next off, we have a bye week, and then we already covered Red River, so we're just going to skip that. We'll go straight to Florida. Texas has this one at home on a morning slot. I don't have too much analysis of this game. I think that Texas is a more talented team. I think there's more continuity with the team. I think Florida's offense could give the defense a little bit of a scare, possibly, especially with the play caller they have, and not just that, but the wide receiving core and just the overall offensive firepower they have. But defensively, I'm not too worried about them, and I think that Texas will score enough to win.
Yeah, for me, I think it comes down to the fact that it's at home. There's the fact that they lost this game last year, I think is going to serve as added motivation for Texas. And I do agree with you. I think all in all, Texas is the more talented team, and they don't lose at home very often. I think, when you go back to the last 3 to 4 years, I think the only home loss is actually just Georgia.
Georgia, yeah.
So to me, I agree with you. I have Texas winning. Then the next week we have them playing Ole Miss at home, and to me, this is as simple as to beat one of these Saban defenses. You have to have a quarterback who's not only mobile but really talented from an arm standpoint, and that is absolutely what Trinidad Chambliss is. They're going to be pretty special in terms of their backfield with Keywan Lacey and Trinidad Chambliss. I think that's going to pose a lot of different threats, especially from a run game standpoint with Trinidad Chambliss. It's going to make it a lot harder to play some of the split safety coverages that you really want to when you face one of these RPO offenses where, really for the RPO, it's a numbers game, right? If you've got 2 for 2, you're going to swing it out. If you've got 2 for 1, you're going to swing it out. But if you got 3 over 2, well, that means that there's one guy that's not going to be blocked. And really, it's two guys that aren't going to be blocked. You don't want to throw the bubble there. You don't want to throw the slant there. And so you can't play split safety though when the quarterback's involved in the run game because now that's an extra gap that gets created. If you're playing split safety, that means that you're now 2 gaps short and you can't really find a way to make up for that. So a lot harder to play split safety. I think it's going to really limit what Muschamp's able to do on the offensive side of the ball. And then defensively, I think Ole Miss is going to be awesome this year defensively. I love what they did in the portal. They got a lot deeper up front. They improved pretty much everywhere in the back seven. So that's another really big thing to keep in mind. And so I think Ole Miss is going to be a top 10 team in the country, and I have Ole Miss winning this game.
Yeah, you've heard me say it, and I've said it multiple times since I've seen the schedule get announced. I just have a weird feeling that Trinidad Chambliss is going to have some Johnny Manziel versus Bama 2012 Black Magic going on in this game. He's going to do exactly what he did against Georgia, and Texas could do everything right, and they're going to lose this game.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, in the Sugar Bowl, there were a lot of things that Georgia did really well, right? If you're looking at, I think the biggest encapsulation is there was 2 consecutive games. There was 2 consecutive plays, sorry, where Georgia had 2 guys on Chambliss that were untouched and in the backfield, and Chambliss turned that into a first down, and then he turned it into a 35-yard completion. So that kind of goes to show you that Chambliss makes magic out of pretty much everything. So I I do think that's going to happen again. So then they host Mississippi State. They're more talented. It's at home. They are coming off a loss. I have Texas winning because of all three of those factors.
Yeah, it's going to be an ugly game for Mississippi State.
So then they play at Missouri. I think there is an advantage here for Texas in that they do run wide zone themselves. They run outside zone, whatever you want to call it, stretch zone. They're gonna be able to prepare for Missouri's run game by practicing against themselves. And the other part is I don't really trust anyone at quarterback for for Missouri, and you need good quarterback play to beat a Saban tree defense, and I don't really believe Missouri has that. And Missouri doesn't beat teams they're they're worse than. So I've got Texas winning.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for Missouri, it's kind of a problem that they've dealt with for a couple of years now. Even when they had Brady Cook, he was not an elite processor. He was not an elite quarterback by any means. He was serviceable enough to do what needed to be done a lot of the time. But other than that, he's not someone that can really elevate an offense and really just um, beat someone by themselves if they need to. Austin Simmons, I think he's decent, but like you said, I wouldn't trust him right now against Texas or other really high level opponents in the SEC. And you can't just win these games just by running the ball. They tried to do it last year against A&M and couldn't work. So I'm going to go for Texas here.
So then the next week is at LSU. I'll be honest with you guys, this was a coin flip for me. I'm sticking with Texas winning for now because I think they're more talented, and I think really for me it's the fact that Arch Manning's legs I think play a big factor when I think about what has given Blake Baker a lot of problems. It's been these running quarterbacks or guys with legs, guys that can scramble. Arch Manning fits that to a T, and he's a better passer than a lot of the guys that have given Blake Baker problems. So it's by the narrowest of margins, especially because offensively LSU is going to really be awesome. But I think Sam Levitt's have some have some really bad moments, and I do think he's going to turn the ball over once or twice, and so that to me is probably why I think Texas wins. Is I trust Arch Manning a little bit more. I do think Will Muschamp is going to create more problems for Sam Levitt than Blake Baker is going to cause for Arch Manning. But LSU by this time a lot is going to be a lot older, a lot more mature. They're going to be a lot more refined. The defensive line is going to be a lot better by this time. But it is a little bit of a question for me.
Yeah, I'm right with you there with the coin flip, and it's exactly the reason why he said it's the mobile quarterback. If we saw Quinn Ewers, I would have LSU beating us by 15. I'm going to be honest with you. Arch is going to have to improvise. He's going to have to create some plays. Now, I'm not talking like LSU is just like some like 2020 Alabama juggernaut because they're not. But I think it'll be a very very close game. But I have Texas winning.
Yes, and the next week they play Arkansas at home. Arkansas is not even close to being as talented as Texas. It's late in the year. I think that's when you're going to see Texas really uh, take their best foot forward. I've got them winning.
Yeah, I'm not going too much into this. You have top of the SEC versus bottom of the SEC. That's just my thought process.
And then it's the why am I forgetting the name of this? It's like in my head and I'm just completely blanking. It's the Lone Star Showdown. My God. Um, so I have Texas winning. It is at A&M, but I think to me, I've seen now Sark against Elko twice, and I've seen him consistently have answers. And I've seen Marcel Reed against Texas, and I've seen him against a front that creates a lot of problems for him. And Will Muschamp's going to be a lot more exotic than PK. I think he's going to present a lot more problems. To Marcel Reed, he's going to show him a lot more looks that are going to really confuse with what he's seeing. And so for me, I've got Texas winning because I just think they're more talented. I think they're better coached. I think they're going to have more answers, and I think they're going to present more problems. You're muted, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not going to really talk about this game, but y'all see my prediction.
Yeah. So then we'll go into, so sorry, before we get into our SEC, Clint has them at 11-1. I have them at 11-1. We both think this team is a national title contender, and quite frankly, I think we both would agree that this is a national title or a bust year for Texas.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think with the talent that you have, that's the most talented team Sark has had. It's the most talented team Texas had. Probably more talented than 2009. I would say probably about on the level of what the 2008 team was, who was more talented in my opinion than the team they had next year that went to the national championship. If there's any year for Sark to do it, it's this year. If he can't win with the roster that he has right now, then I don't know when.
Yeah. So we both just told you what our ceiling for Texas is. So now that we've done basically the entire SEC, we both have Tennessee, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, and A&M not really being playoff contenders. So didn't want to bore you guys with talking too much about them. So that leads us to now our complete SEC outlooks or SEC predictions. Here's my SEC. Here's what I have for my SEC predictions, and then this is what Clint has. Clint, if you just want to walk through kind of what your kind of overview of the SEC is, what you think about each team, kind of what your kind of overview is.
Yeah, so in terms of the SEC, um, I think trying to decipher who's going to be like on top in the conference championship is so hard because this is one of those years, in my opinion, where and we talked about this even before the 25 season, where every coach was really banking on this year for their team. You have
Yeah.
a really talented team um, for guys like Georgia, Oklahoma, LSU. Um, Ole Miss is really talented, even though they bring in a new head coach. I mean, you saw, and it was with a different OC last year, but they were able to still do well in the playoffs last year in the Golding. Um, Even teams like A&M, Alabama, like they're really talented too. But for me, I have Texas at top just because I think that in terms of overall roster, I think that they're the best overall roster in the SEC. For Georgia, for second, my thought process is Georgia hasn't missed an SEC championship since 2020. I can't justify not putting them in there, especially even though they lose a bit on offense. You bring in still a lot from last year, and you have a very good team and a very good coach and very good coordinators on both sides. So I'm picking them until they miss one. Oklahoma and Ole Miss, those two really just I had Oklahoma, Ole Miss, LSU, and A&M all with the same record. It really just came down to tiebreakers for me. That's what it was. It was just who beat who and who lost to who, and that's just how it ended up turning out. Um, I had Alabama. What's it called? Sorry. I have Tennessee, and then Auburn, Florida. I think they're pretty middle pack teams. And then when you get to 11 through 16, it was really just how I thought those games were going to go. I think Vanderbilt, we both agree, is the worst team in the SEC. Um, After one year, I'm not going to really bank them as a consistent team that can contend with the SEC. If I see it again and I'm proven wrong, then okay, then I'll start believing in Clark Lee and the Commodores. But I just can't right now. Kentucky, they just have way too many new pieces, not only on the coaching staff but on both sides of the ball. Mississippi State and Arkansas, they're kind of the same situation. I need to see them be good before I can believe they are going to be good. And then South Carolina and Missouri, like I said, they're just those are two teams that are going to be fringe bowl teams and just teams that there's not really much enthusiasm behind. So that's just a little brief overview of my 1 through 16.
Yeah, so I'll go through mine now. I had Texas and Alabama both being 11-1, and for me, it just comes down to the fact that I think Alabama has a pretty light schedule. All in all, they avoid Texas, they avoid Ole Miss, they avoid Oklahoma, they avoid Florida, right, and they get to play Tennessee and LSU in October and then later in the year. And then we just talked about Texas. And for me, the thing with Georgia is I think they have a really tough schedule, right? They have to play Oklahoma, they have to play Ole Miss, they have to play Alabama, among other teams. And so for me, that was why I had them picking up two losses. And so for me, the thing with Texas in terms of why I think they're going to win or be in the SEC championship is, I think they have the most talented team in the conference. And when you listen to people speak or people that were there at SEC Media Day, that is kind of the general consensus among people is that Texas roster is about as perfect as it gets in the modern transfer portal era of football. And so when you combine that with the fact that Steve Sarkisian, who for a while there was considered one of the three best play callers in the country, giving him the ability to focus most of, if not all of his attention on the offense and figuring out how to maximize offensive production, I think that's going to make a world of difference. And then you add in a guy who I think is a top three coordinator in the SEC and Will Muschamp. That's a pretty strong recipe for success. So that's why I have Texas and Alabama in my SEC championship. But I have Ole Miss, Georgia, and Oklahoma being playoff teams. They're all going to be 10-2 or better. When you talk about LSU, Tennessee, and beyond, and then lower than that, I think those are good teams, but teams that I have a lot of questions about, and teams that, quite frankly, I don't think are really serious playoff contenders, especially once we go to 8 and beyond. Texas A&M, I don't trust the quarterback even a little bit. I think the secondary is fine, but not great. It's certainly not what Mike Elko has talked them up to be. And then we talk a little bit about some of the concerns I have with them in terms of schematically and structurally. There's a lot of things I don't love about what they do with their linebacker play and how I think it leads to a lot of boom or bust. And that shows up in the run game explosives. They were bottom of the SEC in runs of above 10 yards, above 20 yards, and above 30 yards. And they were outside the top 100 nationally in all three categories, and you don't win many games doing that. You can get lucky with a really light schedule like they did last year, but with a tougher schedule like they have this year, it's hard to really believe in them. And then beyond that, it's teams with new quarterbacks, new coordinators, new head coaches, and who have tougher schedules. So that's kind of how I view it. And then talking about my SEC championship game, Texas and Alabama. There's a little bit of history here. Steve Sarkisian is 0-2 versus Kalen DeBoer. And by this point, it does feel like Alabama and their quarterback would be clicking. This would be one of the times you don't want to play Alabama, especially with Keelan Russell now being able to play in his 13th game, or Austin Mack, a defense that is going to be awesome, a really, really good defense. I think this is going to be an awesome game. I think it's going to be really close. And I think I would actually give the coaching advantage to Alabama, but I trust Arch Manning a little bit more than Keelan Russell. I trust Will Muschamp a little bit more than I trust Kane Womack. And in these really close competitive games, I tend to pick the team who I think has the better quarterback. And for me, that is Texas. So I've got Texas winning the SEC championship.
Yeah, so for me, I have a rematch of 2024. I have Texas versus Georgia. Um, I'm just going to go on a limb and say Texas finally wins, but I'm not gonna lie to myself. Georgia's gonna win this game. Until I see Sark finally beat Kirby Smart, I can't pick Texas in good faith. So Texas will go to the SEC championship, and Kirby will do what he does with Texas, and he will end up winning the SEC. And both teams will make the playoffs, and we'll see what they do after that. But yeah, I have Georgia winning the SEC and Texas making the championship game.
Yeah, if this was then the SEC championship, I'd be with you 100%. I would also be picking Texas to win, just because it's just so hard to really believe that Texas is going to win when they've been 0-3, and the offense has been pretty anemic in all three games. It hasn't been like they've really shown signs of life offensively. They haven't. And for as much as Will Muschamp's going to know about Georgia, Kirby Smart's going to know just as much. So that there isn't really a big advantage you can point to for Texas outside of the talent advantage. But if there's anything that we know about a Kirby Smart team, it's that they don't really have an issue with being out talented, because they're just going to out execute and out scheme you. And I would view that in the same way, even in this matchup. So I'm with you there. If this was the matchup, I would take Georgia to win.
Yeah, but other than that, don't have anything else to add.
Yeah, so that is all for our last episode talking about the SEC. We really hope you guys enjoyed all of the different previews. If you missed any of them, you can go back into the YouTube channel. Just look up the Clint and Pack Show, and you'll be able to find each team that we broke down. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit about the Big Ten. Obviously, we're not going to do all 18 teams, because that would be quite literally impossible in an hour. But what we will do is we will give our projected standings. We'll talk about we'll talk about how we would tier those teams. So we'll talk about which teams we think are national title contenders, which ones we think are playoff contenders, and then we'll talk a little bit about the teams that we think are national title contenders, what we think will make or break their season. And then we'll talk after that. In 2 weeks, we'll do the ACC and the Big 12 in one episode. The week after that, which will be by then, that'll be August 25th, we'll give our national title predictions, our playoff previews, and we'll give our Heisman Trophy predictions. We'll give our some of the different awards. We'll predict those as well. And then the week after, it'll be season time. So Clint and I will start to do game previews. We'll pick 5 of the biggest games, and we'll just break those down. We'll tell you guys our keys to the matchup, what each team has to do in order to win, and we'll really dive into the film starting from there. But that's going to be all for us today. Follow Clint at Clint J. Barrows. Follow me at Coach Pack _. Follow Ghost at, I think it's Cord Samuel now because he changed his at. Let me check that really quick. But follow Total Coverage. Subscribe here. Yeah, it's Cord Samuels. Follow him there. We really appreciate you guys being here. Please like, subscribe, comment, and retweet on the Twitter.